Welcome to Security and GRC Decoded, the podcast where security, governance, risk, and compliance professionals, CISOs, executive leaders, and practitioners can stay ahead of industry trends and challenges. I'm your host, Raj Krishnamurthy, founder of Compliance Co. Join us twice a month to bring you expert insights, actionable strategies, and real-world stories to elevate your security, governance, risk, and compliance programs. Each week, we decode the complexities of GRC to help you make smarter decisions and drive innovation in your organization. Let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome. Welcome to Security and GRC Decoded. I'm your host, Raj Krishnamurthy, and we are here to decode with the awesome Shobhit Mehta today. Shobhit is a director in security and compliance at Headspace. Headspace is a mental health and wellness company in San Francisco. He's an accomplished security and GRC professional, author, blogger, and an endurance analyst. And maybe Shobhit, you should tell us if there is anything more that I'm missing. He has an extraordinary story. His story is nothing short of inspirational in his journey into cybersecurity. So welcome, Shobhit, to the show.
Thank you, Raj, for the amazing introduction. I don't think I could have done that better myself. Thanks for that.
Thank you. So Shobhit, maybe let's start with something. Let's do the shock and awesome thing, right? What is one controversial opinion that you hold on security or GRC?
I have been in the industry for 14 years, Raj, and I think I have seen companies of all sizes and shapes. I have been with companies with 5,000 people team, all in information security. And when I joined my current company, it was just me and our CISO at the time. And through all that experience, I've realized that there is always this opportunity to streamline the work that we do. And more often than not, GRC teams tend to overburden themselves just for the sake of running through audits throughout the year. So I think that's something that I have seen through many different forums. I advise a few companies via this venture capital firm that I work with. And every now and then they have to work on 5 different audits and they have different timelines for each of them. And then I ask them why, and they don't have an answer. And I think that's something that I have as a controversial opinion, that GRC teams tend to overburden themselves, which they should not. And there is always opportunity to streamline, which they can always do in whatever they are doing.
I think that's a very interesting point. And I really want to come back and talk about what they can do, right? And sort of what is the basis on which you're making some of those statements and how we can help them. Why don't we start about you? Maybe let's talk about what has been your journey into cybersecurity and GRC.
I did my bachelor's in 2011 in computer science. And throughout my undergrad, I was doing coding. I was creating websites for some of the best companies in the world. And I was partnering with many companies on building these websites. And when I joined this company called HSBC, my goal was to do development. But it so happened that in India, when you get hired, you don't have a choice that what you want to do. And for the first 4 years of my life, Raj, I did information security and I had no idea what I was doing. I was creating metrics and dashboards. And like I mentioned in the past, we had a team of 5,000 people doing information security all over the world for HSBC. And to me, at that point, it made no sense that what I was doing. And I was pleading my manager to go back to coding. I just wanted to learn Java and I wanted to do create this web applications on a higher scale, but that didn't happen. And I was lost for the first 4 years. And then I switched gears. I went to financial risk management, which is the broader umbrella of information security. I did that for 2 years. And then I realized that I didn't like that either. So I went back to the drawing board, and that time I had a conversation with one of my mentors that, hey, I feel I'm lost. I don't like information security, even though I did that for 4 years. I don't like operational risk, even though I did that for 2 years. What's next for me? I have my entire career and life in front of me. And he gave me this advice that I think you should probably go back to the drawing board, and maybe what you want to do is to pursue masters in something that you would want to do for the next 20, 30 years of your life. And at that time, I already gave my GRE, GWAT, everything that I had to give for this admission. And just as luck would have it, one of my friends at the time was preparing for this MS in information security. And I applied for the same with very little hope that I would get in, but fortunately I got in, and I did my master's in information assurance and cybersecurity at Northeastern. And that really, really opened the horizon that I had in my mind for information security. When I was working for ACSBC, I was only preparing metrics and dashboards. And even though I was looking at all this number of incidents that were being reported by Archer, and I was working on access management, and I was working on this different audits, and I was working on this segregation of duties project, I did not understand the business rationale for it, Raj. And that, even though I was learning all of that, I didn't really make sense of how that's enabling the business. So when I joined this program, the master's program in Boston at Northeastern, that opened my horizon. And for the first year, I learned so much about all the different facets of information security that it's not just about access management or segregation of duties, but there is like red teaming and blue teaming and purple teaming and threat modeling and bug hunting. And I was exploring all of that. And after 1 year, I had the opportunity to work with PayPal. And then I did my summer internship, went back to college. Throughout the second year, I worked with Fidelity Investments on one of their startups where I had the opportunity to build the entire security program from scratch. And I think that was my initiation into information security. And that's where I really learned what it meant to build the entire security program from scratch. So that's like my journey, and I'm sure we have talked about this for such a long time in multiple forums that Headspace has been an amazing place to build this program from scratch. When I joined, I had an amazing mentor. He is still a dear friend, and he taught me all these different aspects of security, right from GRC to application security, infrastructure security, privacy engineering, you name it. And I think I did pretty much all of that in my current role. So,
Oh, that's a fascinating journey. Engineer to maybe an operator of some sort, but he went into operational risk management, financial risk management, and then he just dived into the different aspects of security and security engineering, security operations. That's a fascinating story. What is your view of security and GRC and the intersection?
I truly believe that GRC is the product manager for the information security team. And I'll explain that why. Let's take this as a broader company perspective. Product team, they decide what features they want to build, and then they decide that okay, this engineers are going to work on this particular project or features, and they are like driving the engineering team in some sense. Similarly, if you look at it for the information security team, GRC is doing audits all the time. They have this ability to go and speak to all these different individuals in the engineering team, in the product team, in the legal team, privacy team, and figure out what's going on across the company. And they are the ones who are interfacing with the auditors as well. So I truly believe that GRC has this immense superpower that they can go to anybody, ask them, hey, can you speak about this particular process for 15 minutes? How are we doing our SOX audits, or how are we doing our user access reviews for this financial application, and so on and so forth. And I think GRC is like the product manager. Now, they have been through all these different functions. They have spoken about all these different processes to these individuals, and they have a very good understanding on where we are doing good and where we are doing bad. And I think it's on the GRC team to figure out, because of course they have limited capacity and bandwidth. It's on them to figure out, okay, this is the project that I want to work on or focus on for the next year. And I'll give you an example. Let's say security awareness training. If people are not doing security awareness training, the GRC team has the view of that hey, our employees are not doing their awareness trainings on time, and we should be focusing on that a little bit more. They can make that as a project to kind of go and have reach out to these individuals and say, hey, can you do this trainings? Similarly, they are also managing all the vulnerabilities because they run the vulnerability management program. And if they see that engineers are not doing their job properly on fixing that code or high critical vulnerabilities, then they will be the product manager, and they can reach out to them saying, hey, I want to make sure that you are fixing these vulnerabilities in a timely manner. So that's my view of information security and GRC. Of course, GRC has a superpower to reach out to all those different teams and ask as many questions as they can without worrying about the consequences of that happening later.
Got it. So you're saying GRC has a holistic view into all things security, all things application engineering, and by superpower, they are able to look at this much more broadly and are able to act on it.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what do you think should be how technical should the GRC team be? What's your opinion of that?
I always tell my team that your engineers will love you a lot more if you go to them and tell them, hey, we need let's say if there's an audit request and the audit says you need the screenshot of firewall, and you go back to your engineering team and ask them that, can you give me that screenshot? I think your engineers will love you a lot more if you tell them that I need the screenshot of security groups, and they don't need to worry about what the firewall that we're talking about. Similarly, if you know about GitHub branch protection and you can go and ask engineers exactly what you ask for, that will be truly amazing rather than you letting them know that, hey, we need some screenshot for branch protection and whatnot. And this is something that I favor a lot, that folks in GRC have to go beyond GRC to flourish in their career. And I take my own example. For the first, let's say, 7, 8 years of my career, I only did GRC. I only knew GRC. And that would have restricted me so much if I had done only GRC, only focused on audits. It's good to know 5 different frameworks, but that has to stop somewhere. The requirements are pretty much the same except a few. And it's on the individual to make sure that they're taking a holistic view of their career and going beyond GRC, Raj. I'm a huge proponent of continuous learning, and encourage everybody in GRC to look beyond what they're doing at the moment and look beyond audits, and make sure that they are learning about GRC, uh, about different facets of security and not just focusing on GRC.
No, I think I love it. So what you're basically saying is, not only does it make us the GRC professionals more productive, it also helps to build the social capital within the company for them to go get their job done, right? Because you're respected more, you're trusted more, and maybe you can go faster, farther.
You are absolutely right, Raj. That should be the goal for every GRC professional. That how can I go beyond the realm of GRC, which I'm really comfortable with, and even if they are doing 10 different audits, the requirements are going to be the same. But it's on them to flourish their career and learn about application security, infra security, privacy, and so forth. So they can be a holistic GRC professional or security professional at the same time, like you mentioned, build some social capital and speak the language of business or engineering when need be.
No, that's beautiful. Now, how do you think others perceive GRC? How do the leaders perceive GRC? How do the security teams perceive GRC? How does the rest of the organization perceive GRC? What is your take?
I'll start with my own opinion. When I started with GRC, I thought it's just audits, that GRC is equal to audits. And I think that's a
Alerts.
perception that leaders have as well. When we go to these leaders and we say, okay, GRC, I think there are a few things that come to mind. Okay, do we have software certification? And do we have a software attestation? And do we have the customer? Are we completing the customer questionnaires on time? Or are we doing the vendor assessments on time and so forth? But GRC really has this power to reach out and ask engineers these questions where they are being a lot more thoughtful and go beyond GRC. And I'll give you an example as well. I don't think any audit as of yet asks for the secure SST or DST or software composition analysis or those type of controls. I don't think any audit speaks about, do you have a bug bounty program? I don't think any audit talks about threat modeling, that do you have a formal process for threat modeling? I don't think any audit talks about your relationship with the wider forum and do you have a security insider program or something like that in your organization? And we have to change that perception that we do audits, that's our bread and butter as GRC professionals. But at the same time, there is so much we could do in terms of going beyond GRC and learning about threat modeling and doing that, learning about tech spec reviews and doing that, learning about product feature requirements that are coming up and partnering with legal and privacy teams. And I think we need to change that perspective for the business as well, that when they look at GRC, it's not just about audits, it's much, much more than that. Even though audit is the bread and butter that we have to work on and we have to pass those audits to make sure that we are building trust with our customers and making sure that we are having all this revenue streams open. We are not being a blocker for the sales team. We have to go beyond that and change that perception that GRC is not just audits. There's a world beyond that we need to work on. Yeah.
Now, I think that's a brilliant point. So you're saying GRC is just beyond an annual audit ritual, right? Checking the boxes once a year, it doesn't cut it. And I think you talked about some of the things that you can go do to change the perception, but especially with the leadership team and the security teams, how do are there other things GRC professionals can do to change those perceptions?
There are a few things we have done in my current org that I think any GRC team could do. The first thing is the security awareness training revamp. And I'm pretty sure that all of us, we have to do some sort of security awareness training in our organizations. And more often than not, like you mentioned, there are checkbox activities, Raj. People don't really pay attention to those security awareness trainings. They think this is an annual activity, and it's there for everybody to do in that learning management system that you created. But I wrote about this that each organization is so different, Raj. For example, when I was at PayPal, the security awareness training at PayPal was exactly the same as Fidelity, and that made no sense because the businesses are different. Same is the case with HSBC, that the training at HSBC was exactly the same as Deutsche Bank, but that made no sense. If I ask or if I talk about the current org, the security awareness training at ThreadSpace would be completely different for the security awareness training that at Compliance Cow. And those are some of the things we could do proactively that, okay, we have to do security awareness training. How can we make it more effective? How can we be more proactive in making sure that employees know what they are and they aren't supposed to do and not play the blame game later that, hey, you did this and that shouldn't be the case. For example, let's say if a company, they don't allow sharing PHI on Slack, it's very individual to that company, and some companies may allow it, some companies may not allow it. But the employees, if I'm a new joiner, I won't know until unless you tell me. And the first thing that you need to do is to complete the security awareness training to learn what is allowed and what is not allowed. So things like that we could always do to make sure that we are building that rapport, that we are doing a lot more with the entire company, and we are, of course, the leaders of the company do that training as well, and they can see that we are being more proactive.
I see.
There is one more thing which is very close to my heart, that we started this process at Headspace where we do product risk reviews before a single line of code is written. And what it truly means is we started this project where not just a GRC team or the engineering team, we have folks from the legal team, the privacy team, the compliance team, the application security team, and the infrastructure team review all the PRDs, review all the major tech specs that are being created, and provide feedback even before a single line of code is written. That I haven't seen that happen in the previous orgs that I work with, but that is something that GRC team could do, and that will help reduce the risk of having those bugs or issues at a later end when the code is written, when the features are developed. And all of those, you're not just shifting security left, you're shifting security, privacy, legal, compliance, care, everything to the left, which is the ideal secure threat modeling in my view.
No, I think that's a brilliant point. So the way you answered this question is that you're saying, how do we change perception of the leadership team? And what I'm hearing you say is that the best way to do this is start doing things, right?
Be more
Do things that
proactive.
can
Yeah.
be more proactive, start doing things that show up, right? But people notice a very palpable change, right? And that gets you better.
Correct.
Is okay. No, that is a fantastic. How do you talked about privacy? How do you see? And I know you're a privacy practitioner as well. How do you see privacy fitting into this security and GRC?
I think the realm of GRC is over. It has to be
Hmm.
GRC and privacy, Raj. Some organizations have this luxury of having a separate privacy team and a privacy engineering team per se, and some organizations are not that big that they have a separate privacy team altogether. And again, go back to the previous point that GRC teams need to go beyond what they're doing day in, day out, and they have to be much more proactive. And one of the ideal streams from there is having privacy in the bucket of GRC. So I would say for a smaller company, GRC and privacy go hand in hand. They go in parallel. And in my view, the privacy team or the privacy engineering team, which I manage, is like the business analyst for the engineering team. And I would phrase it in such a way that, let's say if there's a requirement from GDPR and CCPA that we have to delete the accounts in a certain fashion, the engineers don't need to know all the privacy language. At the same time, privacy team may or may not speak the language of engineering, but GRC team has this luxury of knowing all the engineering systems that are in use, all the data pipelines and systems where we store PII, PHI. And at the same time, they can speak the language of privacy given their knowledge in that realm, and they can translate those requirements from the privacy team in a much more effective fashion for the engineering team. So that would be my approach of looking at privacy. There are always so many things that are coming up from many different avenues. The Apple App Store, they had a requirement a couple of years back that all the applications which are allowing users to create their account from the application should allow the users to delete account from the application as well. Now, who is the primary team to drive that conversation? I don't know. So it obviously falls onto GRC, and we should be driving that conversation. There's this requirement from Google that all the data that we are collecting from the application should be filled for Google Play Store. And again, who is responsible for facilitating that conversation? If the GRC team doesn't do that, I don't know. And there are always like this different changes or regulations coming up, and HIPAA and GDPR and CCPA. And I think it's on the onus of making sure that all of things are being done is on the privacy engineering teams.
Okay, that makes sense. Shobhit, you are an expert on high trust. And I actually have listened to your speech on high trust and B-sides SF. I believe you gave it last year or the year before. I'm not
That was in
sure.
2021, Raj. I think that was the first time
2021.
we met. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a brilliant presentation. And maybe we'll put a link to that presentation in the podcast as well. So what was it like to get high trust certified? What challenges did you face? What would your advice be for anybody who's aspiring to get high trust certified, either because they want to get high trust certified like you are in the health business, or because they want to use high trust as a harmonized framework right across multiple other frameworks? What would your advice be?
So I'll answer your question in two parts. First, what's the effort that it took to achieve high trust and what it meant for us as a company, and then secondly, if you're starting your security program from scratch, should you look at high trust from the very beginning? I'll take the first question first. That it When we started this high trust journey, Raj, I was at that time a manager. I used to ask him, "Hey, what's our next goal? This company is asking us for SOC 2 audit and attestation report. We wanted to do high trust, but do you think we're ready for it?" And at that time, I had no idea about high trust. In 2020, I never heard of it. And at one point of time, we just decided that we are going to pursue high trust and achieve that. And there were some contractual requirements which required us to achieve high trust within that year in 2020 when I joined the company. And I, I, at that time, we were only three people in the entire team. One person was doing IT. Me and my manager at the time, we were doing security. And when we looked at high trust, there were like 350 odd requirements in 19 different domains, ranging from privacy to policies and procedures to mobile device management to portable devices and how we're managing those to your application security, just name it, and they had a requirement for that. And I think that was the most transformational part of my entire career. I learned so much. I did the entire gap assessment, what we have, what we don't have, wrote all those policies with authoritative sources and so forth. And that actually, when I was speaking to peers in the industry, they were like, it's going to take at least $500,000 for you to achieve high trust, and you're going to take at least 2 years to complete it. But with the amount of work that we did, we were able to complete that within 100K, including the cost of the audit, by using a lot of open source tools and by using doing a lot of documentation early on and so forth. And we completed the audit within 9 months. So
Wow.
I was talking to the auditors, and they were mentioning that, hey, you should be presenting it somewhere because the work or the amount of work you did is not just hard work, it's a lot of smart work as well. And people ought to know that there's high trust is, let's say, I, it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it's an ultra marathon. But you could do that if you persevere and be smart in your training. So that was the idea behind presenting that in the conference. And it was surreal. I mean, we unlocked so many deals. We had to complete so many lesser questionnaires because of that, because we had the certification. Everybody was able to accept the HITER certification. And the second part of your question is, if I'm a company which is starting their compliance journey, should I start with high trust altogether? And I would say I would probably do something different. If I have to go back in time, I would probably start with SOC 2 plus high trust, because SOC 2 has this flexibility where they allow you to inherit the controls of high trust, but not have the high trust certification, which is kind of odd. Some companies have the requirement that you need to have certification, but there are other organizations which are okay if you do SOC 2 plus high trust, or you have a SOC 2 attestation from the auditor. So I would rather advise companies to go from there if they don't have the budget, or if they don't have the manual capacity to do those audits. That's another mechanism where they can start if they want to have high trust in their compliance repository, but not do the full high trust certification.
And is it because to do the full high trust certification, it's going to cost you more in terms of audit effort? Why would you say that?
High Trust Alliance. So there are three things that come into picture when you talk about High Trust, Raj. First is you have to have your MyCSF instance from High Trust, and that will cost you dollar amount. They have different versions
Tiers.
of MyCSF, yeah, tiers for MyCSF, but it's going to cost you at least 15 to 17K. Then, even if you take the bare minimum High Trust the certification requirements, it's going to be security controls plus HIPAA, because the entire purpose of High Trust is to show your companies or you show your customers that you are complying with HIPAA requirements. If you do that, that's going to be around 300 plus controls in your high trust, and the auditor will cost you based on the number of or the scope of your certification. So it's going to be at least 60 70K at the bare minimum to have the audit fee. And then, of course, you will have to have a lot of tools in place if you want to do that. For example, you need a mobile device management tool. You have to have an EDR. You have to have something that can block the portable devices and USBs. You have to do a lot of work on privacy, and you have to create all those policies. So if you don't have that background of creating policies and having authoritative sources, you're going to hire a consultant. It's going to cost you. So I would rather say that if you are starting your compliance journey and you have the budget and you have the contractual agreement, then go with high trust. But if not, then probably there are better avenues to do that.
Okay. And I remember, I think if I remember right, your title was aptly, I mean, your presentation was aptly titled Achieve High Trust on a Budget. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
achieving
mean,
high
very,
trust
very
on a
well said.
budget. And I think my first slide was that we achieved high trust certification under 100K in 9 months. And you may not believe that, but I still receive emails from people, and people reach out on LinkedIn asking for the templates or asking for some guidance on, because they are studying on their high trust journey and they want to learn about all the open source tools that we used, rather than buying a tool that only serves the purpose of audit. It just doesn't make sense.
I know you're a blogger. Is there a blog that talks about what open source tools you use to achieve high trust on a budget?
I think the B-Sides team, they posted the link of the entire talk, and within that talk, I think there is a link to slides as well. And in the appendix, I do have list of all the open source tools that we used. For
Got it.
example, we used Defect Dojo for vulnerability management rather than buying some shiny tool at the time, because we didn't have the budget for that, and we used many different MacBook settings to achieve some of the requirements rather than buying a different tool which will do pretty much the same thing. So I think I do have a list of appendix in the slides as well. And if your audience is interested, they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or just send me a note, and I'll be happy to help them with the repository.
All right. Thank you, Shobhit. I know that's helpful. You talked about uh, GRC going beyond audits. Maybe I want to double click on that. I think you talked briefly about threat modeling, security awareness training. PRD reviews was a very interesting point that you made. Anything that you want to add or add more color to that? How do we do GRC beyond just thinking about audits?
There is always this opportunity to have continuous engagement with the wider team. And I think that's something that GRC team could focus on, just building that culture of security. And I'll give you an example. The Headspace, we have this program called Security Insider Program. And what it essentially means that rather than having us doing all the work for security for all these different teams, we have these individuals from different teams who are the volunteers and in some sense the extension of the security team, and they are like your first point of contact for anything that you need related to security. So consider this: you join a new company or you join Headspace, you have no idea about what you are or aren't supposed to do. Rather than reaching out to the security team or sending a note to IT help, what you can do is you can reach out to the security insiders in your old company who are working with you day in day out, and they should be able to guide you a lot better and faster than getting a response from the security team. That's something that I think could be done just to build that culture of security. The other thing that I would highly emphasize all the audience members that are listening to this is figure out, do you really need to have so many different audit timelines for each of those audits? Sometimes it's a compliance requirement, sometimes it's a regulatory requirement, or sometimes it's a customer requirement. Then you have to have all the statisticians active all the time, but you can always play with the timelines, and make sure that they overlap as much as they can. So you are not doing one audit in Q1, then going back to the engineering team doing another audit in Q2, and then going back to the engineering team and asking for evidences in Q3, which are all going to be different. Let's overlap all of them. And there is always this opportunity, if you work with your auditors and treat them your friends and let them know that this is the final output that you want to have, they will help you achieve those objectives. So I think that's something that I would want all your audience members to think about, that how they can overlap all those different audit
Very interesting.
timelines, and make sure that they are not doing audits throughout the year.
Got it. So do you plan on an audit calendar early at the beginning of the year, beginning of the fiscal year? Is that how you approach this?
Yeah, we do the same thing, and sometimes you may have to have a bridge letter, or sometimes you have a shorter duration software report, which is all feasible. You just have to be very open with your auditor that this is the goal that you're setting for yourself, and you want to make sure that they overlap as much as they can. So when you create your audit calendar, make sure that if you're receiving some population from a different team, that population can be used not just for one SOC 2 audit or ISO audit. They can be used for SOC 2 plus ISO plus high trust plus cyber essentials, whatever audits you're doing, and it should be work really well. Yeah.
Okay. High trust also has mapping as a harmonized framework, has mapping for ISO, has mappings for NIST 853, PCI DSS 3.2.1, 4.0, right now. Do you use high trust as a common framework to accomplish, or do you have to do separate work for each of these attestations or certifications?
You can do either, Raj. You can take high trust and you can have all those authoritative sources in the scope of the audit, but that's going to increase a lot in terms of cost for the entire certification. And I think if you're trying to do high trust, it's okay to have one or two authoritative sources. But some companies, for example, if you are doing a PCI audit, some companies may want to see your attestation and they want to see your final certification that you receive from the auditor, and not rely on the high trust if you even if you have PCI as the authoritative source. So it depends on company what they are trying to do and what are their customer requirements. For example, HIPAA. If you have HIPAA as the authoritative source in high trust, then you don't need to do a different HIPAA certification. You can just use the high trust and leverage that. But if you are using PCI or if you have to comply with PCI, then it might be better to have a separate certification altogether rather than trying to include that in high trust.
Okay, got it. You talked about a culture of security. How do you see automation fitting into this culture of security?
It's the most important thing that any GRC team should be thinking about, that how do they automate the amount of effort that they're putting in into um, making sure that they're not doing redundant work. And again, I'll go back to this point that I have seen companies, Raj, from my experience, they are still using Google Drive to store all the evidences. And what they say, this is like the real world scenario. I'm advising one company at the moment, and what they're doing is they have all this evidences for PCI, ISO, SOC 2 in different G Drive folders, and those folders are in the range of thousands. And the engineering team, every time they have to reach out to an engineering team and ask for the evidences, they ask, "So, what did you provide last time?" And there is no way that the engineering team should be thinking what we provided the auditor last time and think from the beginning that, okay, this is the certificate or the evidence that I need to provide this time. It's so easy to have all of those in a Jira or a spreadsheet or some sort of project management tool where the engineering team can go and leverage the same audit. Now, with the automation tools, that becomes a lot more easier for two aspects. First, you can have cross mapping with different compliance frameworks rather than having three different certifications or requirements for three different certifications. You have just one requirement which is labeled for three audits, and you could produce just one evidence for that. And secondly, if you are using the tool diligently, such as Compliance Cow or other tools in the industry, it just helps to collect all those evidences automatically after you integrate them, and you can free up all your time to do the other stuff that you want to do as part of the GRC team. So I think it's essential for any company to think about all those automations that they can bring to the table. There are many companies right now. I mean, JNA, of course, we talked about this in a separate channel, that there are AI agents now, which are
Yeah.
bringing the evidences for you, and you don't need to do anything. They are AI agents now who are fixing the gaps that you have, and you don't need to do anything. There are YC companies which are building their entire models on this mechanism that you just give us the instance access. Our AI agent will figure out, and they will find the gap with the SOC 2 requirements and your instances, and they will fix it for you. So I think all this different automations and generative AI agents, they enable the GRC teams to be a lot more productive than they currently are, and then focus on other stuff like building the culture of security, working closely with the engineering and product teams, and so forth.
God, no, I think that makes absolute sense. And how do you see, you talked about early on that the GRC teams are getting overwhelmed, and some of this is brought upon by themselves. That was the point that you made in your controversial statement. I want to bring that back here. So, in some ways, I'm interpreting that to say that we can do a lot more than what we are doing right now. Is that a fair statement to make?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And in some ways, so so in some ways you're creating a constraint, and how do these constraints, maybe you can talk about a little bit, what sort of constraints would you create in your world, to go back to your controversial statement, and how do you think that promotes innovation?
Well, if we have the GRC roadmap, and in that roadmap, Raj, you have just the four audits that you want to work on, then it's going to be pretty easy for you to just focus on those four audits. But if you have limited bandwidth, which is the constraint in this case, limited budget, but you want to do a lot more and explore different objectives, then that will create a lot more. This comes to this principle that the amount of effort can be managed with the amount of time that you're dedicating to a particular thing to do. If I dedicate something to be done in 2 weeks, I'll do that in 2 weeks. If I'm dedicating same project 2 days, I'll do that in 2 days. And it's the same thing. If I have a team of four people who are doing only audits, they will do only audits. But at the same time, if I have this huge list of things that I want to do and accomplish, which are not just audits, they would do all of that, and we would do all of that. So that's the constraint part that I would talk about, and maybe think about the growth as a professional as well, and not just focus on doing audits for the company.
Got it. I think that reinforces the other point that you were talking about the culture of security, right? And automation. So your point is that if we automate more and take care of the mundane, redundant stuff, that allows you to focus on a lot more other things effectively, right? And think beyond just audits. I think that's the core part of what you're, and you can do more with less. which is obviously understandable through automation. But your point is that has to be, that pushes the perspective on perceptions on GRC, and that establishes and creates a better security posture for company as a whole.
That's correct. Yeah. I think you
Okay.
phrased it better than me.
No,
That
this,
if,
this is all you're saying. This is all you're saying.
this is like you do automation, you free up time, and then you have all this available time to do amazing other stuff that you could, and enhance your skill set and grow as a professional. So I think you summarized it better than me, Raj. Yep.
No, that is fantastic. Shobhit. Let's talk about. I want to come back to your personal journey, because I think you wrote this. I think several weeks ago, and if I remember right, I read on your LinkedIn. You said you couldn't speak one full sentence in English until you were age 20. I'm not going to ask you how old you are, right? That's not going to be, but it is very fascinating, and I really wanted to, maybe can you double click on that? I want to know about Shobhit, and I want this to be an inspirational talk, right? Especially to those people who don't have access, right? And they are not in the Silicon Valley, they are not in the New York City, right? And they may be somewhere in India, they may be some other in sort of suburban or rural place in the Americas, right? So the question is that what obstacles have you overcome, and how what advice would you give the young people listening out there?
I'll share a brief background about why I wrote that post in the first place, because I was looking at my own journey, and many people, rather after I wrote the book, they reach out to me and they ask for my advice. And I was just thinking it through that it just started the year. I had an amazing 2024. But if I go back 20 years back, I was born in a middle class family. My parents, they didn't have the education that they desired, but they focused on my education. But I went to Hindi medium school. And I think people who are from India, they could relate that when you go to Hindi medium school, everything that you learn about is in Hindi. And that was my mother tongue. And even in college, I went to a tier N college in Indore. And I even in college, we were not speaking in English. It was just like we were speaking in Hindi. And until I entered the workforce in 2011, when I was 20 years old, I could not speak like a full sentence in English and have a conversation in English like I'm having with you at the moment. Even though I could like learn and understand and do all of that, that was really hard for me because my base was in Hindi. And that actually gave me a lot of I put a lot of restrictions on myself that I couldn't speak to some of the people who were coming from like on-site people who were coming to India and meet our team. And I this is something that I developed over a period of time. And I learned that if I put in the hard work and do the hard work, then I can achieve anything I want. And I always people reach out to me and they tell me, "Oh, you are an inspiration." The way I say it is, inspiration is don't look at me as your inspiration. If I do something wrong tomorrow, would I still be your inspiration? No. Don't look at me as the motivation or the motivational speaker. I'm not that either. Because if I don't do something tomorrow, would you stop quitting that as well? No, I think it all comes back to discipline. And I truly believe that my journey started in 2017 after I moved to the US. And at that time, I had no other option but to speak in English. And I think that was the most monumental moment in my career when I moved here and I was given all these opportunities. And I think that changed me as a person, not just in a professional setting, but also as a personal individual that I was. And in 2020, when I joined this company, Headspace Ginger, we were like three people in the team, and all the gyms closed because of COVID. And I started running at Embarcadero in San Francisco. And that time, I had no idea that I'm going to do an ultra marathons in the future, but I loved it so much and I got so disciplined that I started doing ultra marathons and so forth. So it's just that have to build that discipline and everything will fall in place. That's the message that I wanted to give, that no matter where you are in your life at this point of time, you will be able to achieve a lot more if you just be persistent and disciplined in whatever you want to do. That was the message I wanted to leave with the readers after that post. Yeah.
No, that's an amazing story. Um, Shobhit. Now, coming back to you're an endurance athlete and you talked about it. I think that discipline, yeah, I don't know how you do this, but maybe what made you take up ultra marathon and particularly how has it helped you in your professional journey?
So, like I mentioned, when I was growing up, I didn't do a lot of athletics. I was perhaps the most dull boy in our school at the time, and I didn't run and I didn't do any athletics. I didn't play sports. And I tell this to everybody now who reaches out that every body part in my every part in my body is very fresh because I didn't use them when I was younger. So, like I said, when I was in 2020, when everything closed down, I started running on Embarcadero, and I just loved it so much that I did the San Francisco Marathon. And I was looking at all these different folks who were doing ultra marathons at the time, and I got into the running scene in San Francisco. So I created this small club within the community, and we started preparing for shorter runs. And we used to do this trail running, and right across my apartment, we had an amazing trail. It's called Mount Sutro in San Francisco. And I used to go there and run. And I discovered there are places where you could run on trails for hours and hours and miles. And they had like ultra runs on trails. And
Hmm.
that got me hooked as well. It's the first time I felt the runner's high. And I've been persistent with that. The current format that I follow is for the first 3 quarters of my year, I work really hard on everything that I want to do. The next quarter, I just relax. I just plan for the next year, look at my calendar, what I want to do in the next year. That's how I structure my life. And for first 3 quarters, it's all about the professional, personal setting as much as I can, and then the last quarter is all with the family and spending time with them as much as I can. Yeah.
Oh, no, that is very nice. That's very nice. Shobit, I think no podcast is complete nowadays without talking about generative AI. So, what do you see as the implication of generative AI and large language models and security in GRC?
The way I think about Gen AI and security, Raj, I divide that into three different buckets. First is the security for Gen AI. You are developing all these large language models, and you have to secure them from poisoning and from output validation and so on and so forth. That's the first piece. That how do we secure Gen AI as a whole? The second bucket is Gen AI for security, that we are creating this amazing technology. How do we use that for security? The example of that would be creating the SOC analyst. We are seeing a lot of companies right now which are claiming that they will be your level 1, level 2 SOC analyst. And there are some companies which are currently doing threat modeling, and they will be like, okay, you don't need to do anything. You just give us your PRD and tech spec, and we will do the threat modeling for you. So that's the second aspect of it. And the third one is the security for Gen AI threats. And the way I think about that is what would be the threats that could be presented with the amazing technology that we are building? For example, the deepfakes. It's so hard at the moment to figure out which of the videos are real, which of the videos are deepfakes. The second aspect of that would be phishing email. The quality of phishing email has changed tremendously over the last year. And I'm speaking to all these email security vendors, and they're still trying to figure out a common or good path to prevent the companies from that. So that's how I think about security for Gen AI, security from Gen AI, and then how we can use that for preventing threats that are being generated from this technology. There are many things that are happening right now. I'm currently contributing to this white paper with OWASP. It's for the AI agents. So the way it works is OWASP already has the top 10 for LLM, that if you're building a top 10 or you're building a technology which uses LLM, then you should be considering all these different risks that OWASP has already highlighted. The subsequent part to that is now you want to build an agent on top of that LLM. And how do you prevent that LLM agent to or not be malicious? So that's something that we're working on. I think the most common theme that comes across when I speak to different peers is how we are doing the authentication and authorization of those AI agents. Let's say in the near future, you have an AI agent, I have an AI agent, and how they would be working together to fix uh, to not interfere in each other's authorization. The second aspect of that would be a privilege. What can they do when they think about the AI agents? And if they do decide to, let's say, go beyond their realm, do we have a quill switch for those kind of AI agents and so forth? So that's still under consideration. Your audience can always reach out, and I'll be more than happy to load them in the working group. There are many industry peers and experts who are working on this OWASP top 10 for AI agents, which is still in private beta. Yeah.
No, makes sense. I makes sense. Now, I think one of the challenges that I see is that traditionally cybersecurity has been a very deterministic principle, right? I mean, you it is evidence-based analysis. You want to very specifically know which users have MFA enabled, which users don't have MFA enabled, right? Which systems have logging enabled, logging and monitoring enabled, which systems don't. But generative AI typically has been a very probabilistic model. It is, right? Large language
Correct.
models are inherently probabilistic. So how do you sort of so there is a myth and the reality of Gen AI and what it can do, and I think there is a the maturity is significantly improving. But how do you see the balance between the myth and reality? What is myth and what is reality? Is there anything that you want to talk about?
It's very easy to build an application based on Gen AI Raj for a team of 5 people or 5 individuals, but it's very hard to scale those applications. And that's something that people don't often understand, that it's easy to create a wrapper on OpenAI ChatGPT model, and you will be able to create an application that's like when you read post on LinkedIn that I just created an application for $30. That's what they're doing, create an application for themselves. But it's really hard to build on those applications and make it usable and accessible and scalable for companies or enterprises with thousands of employees or users. That's the distinction that I want to make, that the myth versus the reality. It's easy, but it still needs a lot of inputs and guardrails. One example would be if you're creating an application which is only for a few people, you may not pay a lot of attention to guardrails, which is the foundation for security. But if you're creating an application which is, let's say, a mental health coach per se, you have to put guardrails because there are millions of users who will be using your application in the near future. And if you don't put the guardrails from the very beginning, it's going to be very hard for the Gen AI to work properly, and it will be giving out malicious output and whatnot. So that's a distinction that I want to make, that it's easy to make an application on Gen AI for a small scale or for a personal project, but the scale of doing that for millions of users is very different.
We are reaching almost at the end of our podcast. Shobhit, you are an author. And are there any podcast, audiobooks, books you read, listen to, and please feel free to give a shout out to your books as well. Anything that you want our listeners to know?
I see a lot of security blogs right now, and some of them are very superficial, but I really love the blog by Bruce Schneier. That's like my go-to blog. He's one of the best individuals in security. He invented the bcrypt algorithm. I had a chance to meet him once when I was in Boston, and he came to our college to give a lecture. And I think that's the blog that I would recommend all security professionals to read. It's very foundational. It speaks a lot about different facets of security. It's called Schneier on Security. Podcast. I'm not a huge fan of podcast, and the this is again one philosophy that I have, that the source of knowledge is books is greater than blogs, is greater than audiobooks, is greater than the podcast. So podcasts are there at the very end. I think it's more of a tail end of my source of knowledge. But I would highly recommend this one book. It's called Security Architecture in Engineering by one of the British authors. I forgot the name, but that book really helped me a lot in learning a lot about security engineering and what it really means. Those two resources I would highly recommend to the audience. Yeah.
Okay. And hopefully this podcast changes your perspective on the pecking order, podcast being the last.
I
Uh,
did listen to the previous four podcasts, Raj, and there was so much knowledge from different folks. There was Abhay and other people you had on the podcast. I listened to those, and that really, really got me hooked on how different companies are doing security in GRC engineering at its scale. I think that was a very, very nice listen. Yeah.
no, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Shobhit, thank you very much. And it was a fascinating conversation. And no matter what you said, you will continue to be an inspiration, a fantastic inspirational story into cybersecurity. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you for listening to Security and GRC Decoded. We are your go-to resource for staying ahead in governance, risk, and compliance. If today's episode resonated with you, we would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. To dive deeper into these topics, visit us at compliancecow.com and follow us on LinkedIn for more insights and community conversations. Join us next time as we continue decoding the future of GRC. Thank you.